2,000 years ago, a Roman philosopher wrote a handful of ideas about money that most financial advisors still haven't caught up to. He never mentioned a single stock, a single interest rate, a single retirement account, and yet somehow, his rules explain more about lasting financial peace than most of what you'll find in a modern finance book. Today, we're going to walk through the Stoic money rules that senior men who've actually found peace tend to live by. Not theory, not abstraction, but rules a man can actually apply this week. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Everything we're about to cover is really just this one idea, applied to different corners of a man's financial life. Poverty and wealth, Seneca argued, were never really about the number in the account. They were about the size of the gap between what a man has and what he believes he needs. Close that gap, and a man is wealthy no matter what his balance says. Widen it, and no amount of money will ever be enough. Rule 1. Define enough before the world defines it for you. The first rule is the hardest, because almost nothing in modern life encourages it. Advertisers, neighbors, even well-meaning financial planners are all, in their own way, in the business of expanding what a man believes he needs. The Stoic rule is the opposite. Sit down, honestly, and decide what a genuinely peaceful life actually costs you. Not what would impress anyone. Not what a magazine suggests retirement should look like. Just what you, specifically, need to feel secure and content. A man who skips this step spends his whole life chasing a moving target, because enough quietly redefines itself every time he gets close. A man who does this work once, honestly, gets to stop running. Take the retired mechanic who sat down at 62 and wrote out, on a single sheet of paper, exactly what his life needed to feel complete. A paid-off house, enough for groceries and grandkids' birthdays, a modest fishing trip once a year. Nothing dramatic, but once it was written down, every financial decision after that became simple. Anything beyond that list was optional. Nothing below it was acceptable to cut. Rule 2. Debt is borrowed freedom. The second rule comes from a simple but often ignored truth. Every dollar a man owes is a dollar of his future control that now belongs to someone else. Debt doesn't just cost interest. It costs autonomy, the freedom to say no to a job, walk away from a bad situation, or simply sleep without a monthly obligation, sitting quietly in the back of his mind. The Stoics didn't have credit cards, but they understood the underlying trade perfectly. Convenience today, purchased with a piece of tomorrow's freedom. The wise senior man asks, before every purchase on credit, whether the convenience is really worth the trade. Rule 3. Lend sparingly. Give freely. The third rule solves a problem almost every senior man eventually faces: a relative or friend in need. The Stoic distinction here is subtle but powerful. Decide in advance what you're willing to give outright. No strings attached, no expectation of return, and be honest, without guilt, about what you're not willing to lend. Loans between people who love each other rarely stay simple. They quietly become a second relationship layered on top of the first, one built on repayment schedules and awkward reminders. Giving what you can freely give avoids that entirely. What you can't freely give, you probably shouldn't lend either. One retired teacher put it simply, after learning this the hard way with a nephew's unpaid loan: "I still help. I just don't lend anymore. If I can't afford to give it away and never see it again, I don't hand it over at all." Rule 4. Guard your privacy, like you guard your peace. The fourth rule is one the Stoics understood instinctively, even without modern psychology to back it up. The less people know about your finances, the fewer opinions, comparisons, and requests you have to manage. A man who keeps his numbers private isn't hiding anything. He's simply refusing to hand other people a reason to weigh in on decisions that are entirely his own. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the exhaustion of measuring his life against what others said and did. A senior man following this rule applies that same wisdom directly to money, keeping the number private, and keeping his peace intact along with it. Rule 5. Spend on what compounds, not what fades. The fifth and final rule is about direction, not restriction. Stoicism was never about deprivation. Seneca himself was one of the wealthiest men in Rome. The rule is simply to spend intentionally on things that actually compound in value over a life, relationships, experiences, health, a legacy worth leaving behind, and to spend far more cautiously on things that fade the moment the excitement wears off, the newest version of something that worked perfectly well before. A man who applies this rule doesn't necessarily spend less. He simply spends differently, aiming his money at what will still matter to him in 10 years, rather than what will impress someone for 10 minutes. One retired farmer skipped the new pickup truck he'd been eyeing for years and instead paid for his whole family's flights to a reunion nobody had managed to organize in over a decade. The truck would have depreciated the moment he drove it home. The reunion is still what everyone talks about, years later. None of these 5 rules require a finance degree or a lucky market. They require only what Seneca pointed to 2,000 years ago, deciding, deliberately, what enough actually looks like, and building every other financial habit around that single answer. Real wealth begins where the need to impress ends. Money is a tool. Freedom is the goal. The wisest senior men protect their peace before they protect their pride. A quiet bank account is often stronger than a loud lifestyle. Every one of these reflections is really just Seneca's rule, restated for a modern man staring down a retirement account, a family loan request, or a shiny new truck in a dealership lot. The richest senior men rarely feel the need to prove they are rich. They've simply done the quiet work these 5 rules describe: defining enough, avoiding debt, giving without strings, guarding their privacy, and spending on what actually lasts. None of these rules are complicated. None require perfect execution from day one. A man doesn't need to master all 5 at once. Most senior men who live by them today started with just one, applied consistently, until it became second nature before they moved on to the next. A peaceful life is the greatest return on investment, and unlike most investments, this one was already available to every man reading this, the moment he decides to actually apply it. So tell us, which of these 5 rules do you already live by, and which one is still a work in progress for you? Share it in the comments below. If this video gave you something worth thinking about, give it a like, subscribe for more reflections like this one, and share it with another senior man who values wisdom over status. Seek wisdom, protect your peace, leave a legacy.